You walk out to your garden on a cool morning in early June, the dew still heavy on the grass, and you crouch down beside your tomato plants the way a body does when it is worried. The lower leaves have gone yellow between the veins. The stems are thin, and there is one green tomato already showing a dark sunken patch on its bottom, like a bruise that will not heal. You did everything the bag told you. You bought the blue crystals, you mixed them by the little spoon, you paid better than $30 for a sack of fertilizer at the farm store, and here you are again, standing over a plant that looks hungry no matter how much you feed it. And somewhere far off in an office you will never see, a man who has never held a tomato in his hand is doing very well off the fact that your dirt is starving. Now, I want you to sit with this. Everything that plant is begging you for, every last mineral it needs to fill out and fruit and stand up straight, is sitting in your kitchen right now in the trash can, in the coffee pot, in the eggshells you scraped off your breakfast plate this morning. You have been paying good money to throw away one thing and buy back the very same thing under a different name. There is a way of feeding a garden that costs you nothing, not a dollar, not a dime, that was worked out over hundreds of years by farm families who could not have bought a bag of fertilizer if they wanted to, because there was no such thing and no money for it. And the strange part, the part that ought to make you a little angry before we are through, is that the free way is not the weaker way. In a great many cases it is the better way, because it feeds the soil slow and steady, the way the good Lord meant, instead of shocking it with a spoonful of salt. My name is Aaron Miller. I am Amish, and I farm here in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. On the ground, my people have worked for a long, long time. And I am going to be honest with you the way I always am, because honesty is the only thing that makes a video like this one worth the half hour you are giving me. Now I will tell you plain, because I do not want you fooled by my own title. I called this Feeding Your Garden for Free, and I mean it. But I want you to know exactly what free means before we go on. Free means the ingredients cost you nothing, because you already threw money away to get them once. It does not mean effortless. It does not mean you will match a chemical fertilizer's speed in the first 3 days, because you will not, and any man who tells you different is selling you something. What you will get is a garden that gets stronger every single year instead of needing more every single year, and a cellar full of jars come autumn that did not cost you a cent to fill. My wife Melinda and I put down the whole of it, every recipe and every ratio and every warning, in a little book over at aaronmiller.com, and I will not bring it up again in this video. It is there if you want it. If you would rather just listen and learn it free, that is why I am here. Stay with me, because the part most folks get wrong is near the end, and it is the part that can either fill your cellar or make your family sick, and I am not going to let you skip it. Let me tell you first why any of this works, because once you see the plain sense of it, everything after makes plain sense. A plant does not eat the way you think it eats. It cannot chew a banana peel. It cannot swallow an eggshell. Everything you put in the ground has to be taken apart first, broken down small by the worms and the fungus and the little living things in the dirt, until it becomes something the roots can drink. The scientists call those little living things the soil microbiome. My grandfather just called it live dirt, and he could tell live dirt from dead dirt by the smell of it, the same way you can smell rain coming. Dead dirt smells like nothing. Live dirt smells sweet and dark like a forest floor. When you pour a chemical fertilizer on your garden, you are handing the plant a plate of pure salt minerals it can drink straight off, fast, no chewing needed. And that feels like a miracle the first week. But you fed the plant and you starved the dirt. The worms leave. The fungus dies back. And next year that same soil cannot feed anything on its own, so you have to buy the bag again, and a little more this time. That is not an accident. A soil that cannot feed itself is a customer for life. Now here is the whole of it in plain words. A plant needs 3 big things and a handful of little ones. The 3 big ones you have heard of, even if you did not know it. Nitrogen is the green, the leaf and the stem, the growing part. Phosphorus is the root and the bloom. the getting started part. And potassium, that is the one the old folks called potash, is the fruiting part. The part that decides whether your pepper plant hands you 3 peppers or 30, and whether your tomatoes come sweet or sour. Then come the little ones. And the two that ruin more gardens than any drought ever did are calcium and magnesium. Calcium is the bones of the plant, the stiff cell walls, and when a tomato runs short of it, you get that black sunken patch on the bottom that folks call blossom end rot, the very thing you saw this morning. Magnesium sits at the heart of the green color itself, so when a plant runs short of it, the leaf goes yellow between the veins, while the veins stay green, striped like a Sunday sweater. Now hold that in your mind, because every single free thing I am about to show you feeds one of those. And once you can name what your plant is short of, you will never again stand in a farm store letting a stranger guess for you. So let me walk you through what is in your kitchen, and I will tell it slow. Start with the coffee. The last cup of last night's pot and the grounds in the basket do not belong in the sink. Used coffee grounds are a slow nitrogen feeder, right around 2% nitrogen by weight. And here is the beauty of it. They do not burn a root the way the blue crystals do, because that nitrogen is locked up in the grounds and has to be released slow by the dirt. There is only one rule, and it is the rule most folks break. Do not pile them thick. More than about a ½ inch deep, and they mat down like wet felt and turn hard, and water will run right off instead of soaking through. A thin dusting worked into the top inch of soil. That is all the earth ever asked for. Now the eggshells. An eggshell is near about 95% calcium carbonate, and one shell holds close to 2 grams of pure calcium, about what is in a calcium tablet a body would take. That is your blossom end rot cure sitting right there by the stove. But here is the warning nobody hands you, and it is the difference between calcium this season and calcium never. A cracked eggshell tossed whole in the ground can take a 1.5 years to break down. 18 months. Crack your egg on a Tuesday, bury the shell on a Wednesday, and your tomatoes this year will not see 1 milligram of it. The only way to unlock it fast is to grind it fine as flour. Dry the shells a few days on the windowsill till they are brittle, then grind them, and I mean grind, not crush, until it feels soft as powder between your fingers. Work a shell's worth into the soil around each seedling when you set it out, and the plant can reach it. Crushed is a promise for next year. Ground is dinner tonight. Then there is the potassium, the fruiting mineral, and it comes from the peels your children throw away without a thought. A banana peel is a potassium mine, better than 40% potassium by dry weight, higher than a bag of balanced fertilizer off the shelf, and it carries a little phosphorus with it besides. The slow way is to bury the whole peel a few inches down beside a tomato or a rose, and it will feed that root zone over 6 or 8 weeks. The faster way the old wives kept was a peel tea, 3 or 4 peels steeped in a covered jar of water on the back porch for 2 days, then poured a cupful around each flowering plant once a week. It comes out the color of weak tea and it smells faintly sweet, and the plants answer it. Now these 3 together, the coffee for the leaf, the ground shell for the bone, and the peel for the fruit. My grandmother had a little saying for it when I was a boy. She said the dirt eats in courses same as a person, breakfast and bones and a sweet at the end. I did not understand her then. I understand her now. But I promised you honesty, so here is where I have to stop you and tell you what the kitchen scraps will not do, because this is the part the cheerful videos leave out. Kitchen scraps fed loose to the top of the soil are a fine supplement, but they are slow, and in a cold spring they are very slow, because nothing rots fast in cold dirt. If your plant is starving right now, today, scraps alone will not save it in time. And a banana peel or a coffee ground laid on top is also an open invitation to every raccoon and possum and rat within a ½ mile, and I will not pretend otherwise. So let me give you the first thing that is not in the old grandmother stories, the first real upgrade, and it is the one that fixes both of those problems at once. It is called trench composting. Or if you want to be plain about it, digging a hole and burying your supper scraps right in the garden row itself. Deep, a good 10 or 12 inches down. You dig a trench between two rows in the fall. You bury your kitchen waste in it all winter long, a little at a time. You cover it back over each time with the same dirt. And by planting time, the worms have turned that whole trench into the blackest, richest ground on your place, and nothing dug it up because it was buried too deep to smell. You plant your heaviest feeders, your tomatoes and your squash, right over that old trench line, and you rotate the trench one row over the next year. No pile to turn, no smell, no critters, and no bag to buy. That alone will change your garden, and my grandmother never knew it by that name, though she surely did it by instinct. Here is the second thing that is not in the old stories, and this one I want you to sit up for, because it is the closest thing to a real secret I know, and it is very old and almost entirely forgotten. When you burn wood in a stove or a fire, and you damp it down so it chars instead of turning all the way to fine gray ash, what you have left is charcoal, black, light, full of little holes, too small to see. The scientists call it biochar, and there is a stretch of ground in the Amazon that the natives built up this way hundreds of years ago that is still, to this day, the richest black earth on that whole continent. So rich it is famous, and they call it the dark earth. Here is what the charcoal does. Every one of those little holes is a house. It is a house for water, and a house for the tiny living things in the dirt, and a house for the minerals. So instead of your nitrogen and potassium washing away with the next hard rain, the charcoal holds onto them and hands them to the roots, slow, for years, for longer than you will farm that ground. But you cannot just dig raw charcoal into your garden. And here is the part folks get wrong. Because raw charcoal is so hungry for minerals, it will pull them out of your soil the first year and starve your plants. You have to charge it first. You soak it a week or two in something rich, in that banana peel tea, in old fish tank water, in a bucket with your kitchen scraps, until the charcoal has drunk its fill, and then you dig it in. Do that once, and it works in that soil for a lifetime. That is not something you buy. That is something you make from the ashes of the fire that already warmed your house. And here is a third thing the old scrap feeders mostly missed. And it is the smartest of all if you want to stop feeding your garden by hand altogether. Instead of hauling scraps and brewing teas every week, you grow your fertilizer. There is a plant called comfrey. It is a big, rough, leafy thing with a root that drives down 6 feet or more into the subsoil, down where your tomato roots will never reach, and it pulls the deep minerals up, the potassium and more, and stores them in those big leaves. You plant it once, in a corner where it will not be in the way, because once it is in for good. And then 3 or 4 times a summer you cut the whole thing down to the ground with a sickle, and it grows right back. You lay those cut leaves down as a mulch around your tomatoes, and they rot down into a potassium feed better than most anything you can buy, or you steep them in a barrel of water into a strong tea. It is a plant that mines your own subsoil for free, and hands it up to you all season long, year after year, and asks nothing back. The old market gardeners in England knew comfrey well. Somewhere along the way we forgot it. You do not have to. There is one more free feed I want to hand you before we leave the garden, and this one is a 2-in-1, because it feeds and it doctors at the same time. Do not throw out the papery brown skins off your onions, and do not throw out the weeds you pull either, and I will tell you why. The old wives kept a paper bag of onion skins behind the pantry door all winter, and come spring when they started the seedlings on the windowsill, they boiled a pot of water, dropped in the skins of 5 or 6 onions, turned off the heat, and let it steep overnight into a color like stained oak. They strained it, watered it down 1 part tea to 3 parts water, and fed it to the tender seedlings. because onion skin carries a natural thing that fights the fungus behind damping off. That heartbreak where a seedling stands perfect at breakfast and lies collapsed at the soil line by supper. One caution, do not spray it on the leaves in the hot afternoon sun, because the oils in it can scorch tender growth, so water the soil and not the plant. And the weeds you pull, the nettles and the pigweed, do not waste them either. Pack a bucket full of them, cover them with water, weight them down, and let them rot 2 or 3 weeks into a dark, stinking brew. And I will tell you plain, it smells terrible. But that stink is nitrogen, pulled up out of your own ground by weeds that were stealing it, and watered down 10 parts to 1. It is a fast green feed that costs you nothing but a bucket and the holding of your nose. Now, I said early on that once you can name what your plant is short of, you will never be guessed at again. And here is the tool that lets you name it, and it is the smartest $2 you will spend all year. Buy a little box of soil test strips at the farm store, or send a sample to your county extension for a few dollars, and find out 2 things before you feed anything. Find out your pH, whether your dirt is sour or sweet, because a plant sitting in the wrong pH cannot drink the minerals even when they are right there in the ground, and folks pour on more and more feed, chasing a hunger that a little lime or a little sulfur would have fixed. And this is where the ashes from your wood stove come back a second time, because plain wood ash, not the charcoal now, but the fine gray ash, is rich in potassium, and it sweetens sour soil like lime does. A couple handfuls scattered thin in the fall does a garden good. But mind me, it raises the pH fast, so you test first and you go light, because too much ash will swing your dirt too sweet and lock up the very iron and the very minerals you were trying to feed. Free does not mean careless. Free means you have to know what you are doing, and now you do. Now, before I go further, let me pause for just a moment, because I have laid a good deal on you, and I want to say one thing plain. If you want the kind of home where the bills come down and the waste goes to near nothing and the pantry stays full through a hard winter, my wife Linda and I run a little community for exactly that, where folks trade the old methods and ask us questions whenever they get stuck. The link is down in the description. That is all I will say about it. Now let me get to the part I promised you, the part that matters most, because feeding the garden is only half the old way. The other half is putting the food up so it lasts. And this is where I have to be more careful with you than anywhere else in this whole video, because this is the one place where the old way, done wrong, can truly hurt you. Here is the safety word plainly, because this matters more than any dollar I will save you. When you seal food in a jar and store it on a shelf with no ice and no cold, you are creating a sealed world with no air in it. Most things that spoil food need air, but there is one that does not, and its name is botulism. And I am going to say it slow because folks skip past it. Botulism comes from a tiny thing that lives in the soil, harmless as dust when there is air around. But seal it in a jar with no air and no acid, keep it warm, and it wakes up and it makes a poison so strong that a taste can kill a grown man, and you cannot see it, you cannot smell it, and you cannot taste it. Now do not let that scare you off, because our people have canned safely for generations, and once you understand the one rule, it is simple as anything. Here is the rule. That botulism thing cannot live in an acid world. It just cannot. So there are 2 families of food and 2 different ways to put them up, and you must never mix them. The first family is the high acid foods. That is your tomatoes with a little added acid, your pickles, your fruit, your jams, anything sour or made sour with vinegar or lemon. Because they are acid, the botulism cannot grow. And so these you may safely put up in a plain water bath canner, which is nothing but a big pot of boiling water deep enough to cover the jars, held at a hard boil for the time the tested recipe tells you. That is the old way most grandmothers knew, and it is safe, but only for the acid foods. Now hear me, because this is where good honest people go wrong. Tomatoes today are bred sweeter and less sour than the tomatoes your grandmother grew. So the modern guides tell you to add a spoon of lemon juice or citric acid to every quart of tomatoes before you water bath them. And you should do it every time, no matter what grandmother did, because her tomato and your tomato are not the same fruit anymore. The second family is the low-acid foods, and this is the family that can hurt you. That is your green beans, your corn, your peas, your carrots, your squash, your potatoes, and every kind of meat and broth. These are not sour, so botulism can grow in them, and here is the hard truth. A water bath canner cannot save them, because boiling water only ever reaches 212 degrees, and that is not hot enough to kill the botulism spores. The only thing that kills them is real heat, higher than boiling, and the only way to get that heat is a pressure canner. A heavy pot with a locking lid and a gauge that builds steam pressure and drives the temperature up past 240 degrees. A pressure canner is not the same as a pressure cooker for supper, and it is the one tool in this whole video I am telling you that you must buy or borrow and cannot make from a milk jug. If you want to put up green beans or meat, you use a pressure canner, and if you do not have one, then you freeze those foods or you dry them. But you do not water bath them. Not ever, no matter what anyone tells you. I would rather you throw a whole crop of beans to the hogs than put one jar on your shelf that you cannot trust. And 3 more plain rules, and then I am done with the warnings. Leave the head space, the recipe tells you, that little gap of air at the top of the jar, because too full and the jar will not seal, and too empty and it may not either. Second, if you live up high in the mountains, water boils cooler up there. So you must add time, or add pressure, the way the guide for your altitude says, and there are free charts for it from your county extension office. And third, and this is the one that has saved lives, when you go to open a jar months later, if the lid is bulged, if it hisses or spurts when you break the seal, if it smells wrong, if anything looks cloudy or off in a jar that should be clear, you do not taste it, you do not feed it to the dog, you throw the whole jar out, jar and all if you must, without opening it near your face. When in doubt, throw it out. That sentence has kept more farm families safe than any medicine ever did. Now let me tell you what all of this really costs. Honest math, laid out plain. A season's worth of chemical fertilizer for a good home garden runs you between $60 and $140 every single year, forever. And it gets a little dearer every year, besides. The scraps that feed my garden cost me nothing because I was going to throw them out anyhow. A pressure canner, the one tool you do need, runs you between $90 and $140 one time, and a good one lasts 30 years or more. So call it $4 or $5 a year, spread out, and the jars, if you tend the lids, get used again and again. A single quart jar of green beans off a grocery shelf runs you better than $1.50 now, often more. And a family that puts up 200 or 300 jars in a good autumn, which is an ordinary Lancaster County autumn, has kept $400 or $500 in the house that would have gone out the door to the store. And the food is better, and you know exactly what is in it, which is only your own vegetables and a little salt. That is not about being cheap. That is about being free. So let me tell you who does not want you to hear any of this, because there is real money in it, and I am not going to stand in my kitchen and pretend otherwise. There is a great deal of money in a bag of fertilizer that a family buys every single spring for the rest of their lives. There is a great deal of money in a truck that brings green beans in a can from 2,000 miles away to a store shelf near you, in the diesel and the aluminum and the middleman and the store's markup. There is no money at all, none, in a man telling you to grind your own eggshells and bury your own coffee grounds and put up your own beans in a jar you already own. A garden that feeds itself is the single worst thing that can happen to a company that sells soil in a bag. A pantry that fills itself is the worst thing that can happen to a supply chain that needs you hungry and at the store every week. So the simple old methods sit quiet in farmhouses like this one, and the loud, bright methods with money behind them get all the shelf space and all the advertising and all the room in your head. Now, I want to be careful here, because I do not want you walking away a bitter man, and I do not believe in the wild stories. I do not call this a conspiracy, because a conspiracy needs men in a room agreeing to keep you down. And that is not what this is. It is worse than that in a way, and stranger. Nobody had to sit down and arrange it. Nobody had to decide to bury the old knowledge. It is just that the bag of fertilizer had a company behind it with money to spend telling you about it, and the eggshell in your trash had nobody at all, because there is no company that gets rich off you keeping your own eggshells. The old way did not lose, because it was worse. It lost because it had no salesman. That is the whole of it, and it is a quieter and a sadder thing than any plot, and it means the fixing of it is up to plain folks like you and me, one garden at a time. So here is what I want you to do this week, and I want you to start small, because a body that tries everything at once tries nothing for long. First, tonight, put a jar by your coffee pot and a jar on your windowsill, one for grounds and one for shells, and just start saving. That is all. Second, this week, when the ground is workable, dig one short trench between two rows and start burying your kitchen scraps in it, deep, and cover them each time. You will not see it work for a month or two, and that is honest, but it will work. Third, get the leaves dry and grind one good handful of eggshells, fine as flour, and work it into the soil around your tomatoes, and watch whether that black rot slows down over the next few weeks. And fourth, if you mean to put food up this fall, do not wait until August. Find out now, this week, whether you have a pressure canner or can borrow one, and call your county extension office, which will send you tested recipes and altitude charts for free, because they are one of the few honest helpers left that has no bag to sell you. Then come back and tell me in the comments how it went. And tell me two things while you are at it, because I read every single one. Tell me what county you are gardening in and how old your house is, so I can picture the ground you are working. And tell me one thing your grandmother or your mother did in her garden that you have never seen written down anywhere. One old method or one old recipe, because those little family ways are exactly the kind of knowledge that vanishes forever the day nobody writes them down. And the comments under this video are how we save them. Someone watching tonight is looking for the very thing your grandmother knew. Next time, I am going to show you the natural next step after today, which is how we take that garden full of food and put up a full cellar the old way, jar by jar, which tomatoes we choose and which we leave, how we test a seal, and the water bath recipes my family has trusted for more years than I have been alive. It is the other half of everything I told you today, and it is coming next, the good Lord willing. Because none of this, in the end, is really about vegetables. It is about a person and a patch of dirt, and a simple question the careful old folks asked every single morning before the world taught us to stop asking it. They looked at the milk jug and the eggshell and the coffee grounds and the peelings, and they did not ask what to throw away. They asked, where does this belong? And when you poke a hole in the bottom of an old jug tonight and bury it beside your tomato, or when you carry a jar of grounds out to the row, you are not just feeding a plant. You are stepping back into a long line of plain, determined people who never once let themselves be sold the same thing twice that they could have kept for nothing. It is going to work. It has been working for a very long time. The people who built this country with their hands knew things we are only just starting to remember. And that is still how it is done in any farmhouse that remembers.